So guys, it's Corey Lee here again, and I'm actually out here at the park, early morning, taking some photographs, and I made a decision in my photography that I would really like to talk about and explain. And so after being in Pentax, well, I shot Canon for 2 years. I got my first Canon in 2014. I switched to Pentax in October 2016. And on today, I think this was like 3 days ago, maybe November 29th or so, I ended up switching back to Canon, and I couldn't be so much happier. I couldn't be more happy, man. And I would say the reason why I did it was because of it was about time for me to go with a camera brand that could allow me to be able to have decent enough video functions that could work side by side with my Sigma FP as my main camera, but just another camera that was really great at photography, but also allowed me to have decent enough video functions to be able to use as a backup camera, a second angle camera, a B cam, or whatever people call it. And I went with the Canon. Now you might ask, well, if you already had an FP, why didn't you go with a Panasonic, especially the S5, if the Canon EOS R and the S5 is around the same price range, but the S5 at least have 2 card slots and IBIS and better video features? Why didn't you go with the Panasonic? And the reason why is because I had to learn my lesson from when I got into Pentax. And the thing that one of the things that I did not like about the Pentax system is that a lot of modern affordable glass was just not there. So like, if you wanted modern glass for the full frame system, you had to spend a lot of money on lenses, and a lot of money on lenses, that's going to happen anyway, especially with Canon, especially if I plan to use L glass. But a lot of L glass, it could be found on the used market for a very, very, very affordable price. I can almost get I can get a 70 to 200 f2.8 IS and a 35, I want to say maybe a 35 f2 IS for the same, for less money. Oh, and an EF to RF control ring adapter, which I don't have. I can get all of that for the same amount of money that I could find a Pentax 7200 for. The only difference is that Pentax is more, I trust their weather sealing a lot more. Not that Canon's hasn't been tried and true over the years. I just know that Pentax specializes in that a little bit more. My only problem is that Canons work flawlessly. Not that Pentax doesn't, but like, you had to have been in another system before and then got into Pentax and then realized what I'm talking about. But I had some issues with my Pentax camera shooting weddings and things like that, where they're just not able to focus. Like, they can focus, don't get me wrong. I was one of those people that went, on offense when I heard other people say this about the Pentax cameras, that they can't focus. Yes, they can. They can focus well enough for you to be able to shoot sports. However, they don't focus good enough to be able to rely on them when it's time to make money. So yes, you can use it, but it's not the best tool for the job. It's like it's like using a scalpel to trim bushes. It's like, you can do that, but it's not the right tool for the job. It can happen if you really put your mind to it, but it's just not the right tool for the job. The lenses I had in Pentax, I had the HD 35 f2. That was one of my favorite lenses as far as image quality goes, because it delivered this 3D pop that I just really couldn't explain. I haven't seen it in many other Canon lenses, but I have seen it in that lens, and I was like so blown away by that little tiny 35 f2. I'm sure Canon's 35 f2 have the same effect. I just haven't used it. But I do plan on getting it. Another lens I had, my first lens, was my DFA 28-105. I love that lens, but the f5.6 aperture was really killing me, man. And they didn't have any, any lens in that range that was more variable aperture, unless you got the 24-70 2.8, which is also a good lens too. But let's talk about the rest of the glass I had. Okay, so the 28-105, yeah, I talked about that lens. That was my most used lens. I use that lens almost everywhere, anywhere, and it delivered me some nice shots. I love that lens. And that lens actually did focus accurately. I had the 100 macro, the standard DFA, not the WR, but the standard DFA one. That lens was awesome. I love that lens. I had no problems with that lens except screw drive. The 35 millimeter was also screw drive. I didn't like that either. The other lenses I had the HD DA 55-300 PLM. That was an awesome lens, especially for more like a cheaper lens. That was an awesome lens. That lens focused fast. It just didn't focus accurately. And I know that, a lot of people will say that, well, it focuses good enough. Yes. The focus was good enough. It wasn't bad by any chance. It's just that it wasn't like it delivered very inconsistent results. I would say. Then another lens I had the DA 1.4 teleconverter. I loved that teleconverter on my macro lens. However, I wish Pentax did make a full frame teleconverter. They're literally doing themselves an injustice by not doing that. And last but not least, my most expensive lens that I had in the Pentax system was the DFA Star 50 millimeter 1.4, and that's the lens that I hated the most. And I'm the only, my hatred towards that lens is mainly due to the price and the size. But image quality, it was superb. For a Pentax, man, that's one of the best lenses that you can get for the Pentax system. As far as, image quality and things like that go. However, I did find that at the same aperture, at the same focal length, my 28-105 delivered identical results. So once you start stopping that lens down, it don't really look much different than the 28-105 as far as clarity and bite and sharpness and rendering and all those other things. However, man, I feel like that lens was extremely over-engineered. And what I mean by over-engineered is that it was too big, too heavy, too much of everything. Well, for what it was, it's a 50 millimeter, a 1.4 at that, and it's as big as a 70-200 f4. And it made that lens really hard to use because for how big the lens is, you would expect it to be more zoomed in than what it was. It's like, it's a 50. Why does it have to be this big? And I would feel really funny about using the lens because of how big it made my my rig look, and not that it was a bad lens. it just wasn't fun to pick up and use and go and take shots with, you know. And because it was just so big and heavy, and it was only a 50 millimeter. But the biggest problem that I had with it was that it did not focus that well. Like it was so inconsistent, it's pathetic. And after shooting my last wedding, well, I was already looking into switching anyway. I was gonna go to the S5, but then after looking at my last few pictures from my last few jobs, I told myself that I need to go to a brand that could allow me to do really good photography on one body, because I already had my video body, but then it'll also allow me to have really awesome video features that could focus. That could focus so well. And I'm thinking, well, I might want video autofocus, because that was what I was lacking in my FP, was video autofocus. I mean, yeah, you can autofocus in video, but I wouldn't trust it. And so one of the major pain points of people that use Panasonic is autofocus. The autofocus is not that, like, it's not up to par. I mean, and at first I was gonna justify it, because I said, listen, until you shot with a Pentax, don't come holler at me about what camera can't focus that well. If I can nail shots with this, I can nail shots with that. But then I started to say to myself, like, man, I kind of feel like I'm settling. You know, why not just get a Canon? And I wasn't really intending on buying a Canon until the opportunity presented itself. So I put all my Pentax gear up for sale. In fact, I took it to a camera store. I sold it all at a loss, at a major loss. I'm talking, I could have made another $1,000 if I wanted to. I had a K1 and a K3 all of those lenses, and I got about $1,800 out of it trade-in, from reselling. And he was gonna write me a check for $1,800, and I said to myself, well, you got a Canon EOS R up there. Can I play with that? I played with it. I used one of the RF lenses. The RF lens was all right, the 24-105. I like that lens. However, I would much rather stick with EF glass, because EF glass is more adaptable on the other things. Like I said, I do video work as well, and adapting RF lenses onto cinema cameras and onto other brands of cameras is probably not going to be very possible. So I didn't buy the RF lens with it. Well, primarily I couldn't afford it. So he gave me, he let me have the EOS R. It was under 5,000 shots for $1,350, which gave me about, I also got a 50 millimeter 1.8 STM, and I had left about a good 375, 385, something like that left in my pocket. And so I went and bought the EF to RF adapter. That's another $100 out the window. I still have the rest of the money. I'm working on getting something else. And also I'm taking my time, my sweet old time, to think about what other lenses I want with the system. But one of the things that I will say is, when I shot with Canon, the 51.8 was a lens that I didn't really value that much. And I mean, now that I've experienced another brand, I've shot with other stuff, and I would say, like, on the EOS R, the 50 millimeter 1.8 is like the best thing smoking to me. Like, and I know there's better lenses out there. I've had all those other Canon better lenses. I've had tons of L lenses before. I know what better lens looks like. I know what else is out there. So I'm not some guy who just don't understand what he's talking about. I've been there before. I've been all around the block regarding lenses, cameras, gear, and all this other stuff. And I've come to find that I like this combination. In fact, I almost don't want another lens, because I like carrying this around. It's so small, compact. It does almost anything. Like, it focuses like it's nothing. The pictures are clear and sharp. I mean, I can't even hear the thing focus. It's so sweet, man. But yeah, man, I really do miss being in the Canon ecosystem. I really do. And I almost forgot how enjoyable the cameras were to use. And I started thinking about all my old photography that I used to do before I got into another brand and stuff like that. And I was sitting back thinking to myself, like, how come I don't go around and take photographs like I used to? Like, when I first started, I was always with my camera. I always had this thing in my hand. I was always up at 6 o'clock in the morning to hit the sunrise, to go out and get nature photos. I always had my camera in my hand. And I think the reason why is because the Pentaxes, I mean, they're not bad cameras by any means. They're just not that fun to use. Like, they're really not that fun to use. I mean, they feel and I'm not trying to talk bad about them by any means. I never believe in burning a bridge I might have to cross again. But I mean, they're just not that fun to use, man. And I mean, like, you can look at spec sheets and all of that stuff all day long, but if the camera if it don't entice you to pick it up and shoot something with it, I don't care how much low light performance it has. I don't care about having IBIS or not. I don't care about 2 card slots or not. I don't care about any of that other stuff. If I don't like to pick up my camera and walk around anywhere and everywhere and just shoot pictures, it's not for me, you know? And I noticed that when I got into Pentax, I stopped being that curious Joe who always had his camera in his hand. I just stopped being that guy. And now that, like, ever since I had this Canon, I don't know if it's a new gear syndrome or what, but even when I first got my Pentax, I wasn't so like this because of the weight and size of the camera. Like, just, it wasn't really the size and weight, because when I had my Canon, that was a DSLR as well. I think it was more so like everything else, not size and weight, but just the way the camera felt in your hand, you know, the mood that it put you in when you picked up that tool. You know, the Canon feels like it's a perfect balance between tool and toy. And it's not toyish by any means, but it's not overly engineered either, that make me feel like it make it too hard to, I mean, like, what I'm trying to say is that, like, you know, like, the Canon is not, it's easy for it to become second nature to you. It's easy to understand the menus. Like, the buttons are simple, the layout is simple. It's everything other than, you know, image quality and features. It's just, I don't understand it. I mean, maybe it's the glass. I really don't know. Maybe it's the way the bodies looked. I really don't know. Maybe it's the way it just felt in the hand. I really don't know. All I know is that, like, I'm more excited to get out and take pictures than I ever was before, ever since the day I first picked up my Canon T3i and I was just running the world with it, you know. And that's kind of what I really just wanted to get at, is that, like, I'm so much more excited to get out and take pictures now for some odd reason. And you know, I really tried to like Pentax. I tried my best to like it. I wanted to switch a long time ago. I didn't want to go to Sony because Sony feels too techy. You know, I used to work at a camera store and I played with Sonys all the time, and Sony just felt like too much technology. I mean, not that, you know, too much technology is a bad thing or a good thing. It just didn't feel like a camera to me. It felt like a computer that took pictures, and, like, it didn't really put me in an artist's mindset. It put me in like, I don't know, I felt more like I needed to be merged with AI in order to be able to make that camera second nature in the back of my mind. But Nikons were always boring. Like I just couldn't like them. They just felt boring. I don't know if it's the color scheme. I don't know if it's the menu layout. I don't know if it's how they design and label. I really don't know, but they always just kind of been boring. So Nikon was always out of the picture to me because they just bored me. Fuji, I would have really loved to go to Fuji, but I like full frame. And also my other choice, if I wasn't gonna go to Canon, was Panasonic. And the only reason I didn't go with Panasonic is because I said to myself, now I remember when I jumped ship and I went to Pentax when they first came out, and I was mad because the options on what glass I could have just wasn't there. It just wasn't tried and true enough to bank my career on it. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I'm gonna learn that lesson that I learned from last time and not just go to the next new thing just because it's new. So I avoided Panasonic because of what I learned in my lesson with Pentax. Don't ever just jump ship to stuff that's new just because it's new and exciting. You know, try to stick with the more tried and true stuff for as long as you possibly can until it just don't work for you anymore, you know? And with the Canon, it's like all the lenses were familiar, the layouts were familiar, you know, what to expect out of the color science was just familiar. It's like everything was, you know, familiar to me already. And I'm like, it just don't make sense for me to not go back to Canon. It just really don't. I mean, I left Canon because I wanted something that, you know, could deliver better picture quality, you know, more dynamic range and more megapixels at a more affordable price. But now that, you know, this 30 megapixel camera is only, you know, 1400 used, man. Yeah, I mean, I got one card slot and no IBIS. I get that, but I lived with that before when I had my 6D. I've never had a camera with 2 card slots until I got the K1 and the K3 Mark II. I've never had a card fail on me, God forbid that ever happens. But it just really didn't matter to me after all of that, you know? So that's kind of the direction that I went to. But
Morning.
hey, how you doing, man?
Doing well.
Yeah, but after all of that, it really just didn't matter. Like all of those little things were not big deal breakers to me. The biggest deal breaker to me was that I wasn't excited about getting up and shooting with my camera. And I got into Pentax 2016, we think 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. I spent 5 years, you know, lacking the motivation of being that curious Joe that I was when I first, you know, being that curious George. I don't know why I keep saying Joe, but curious George that I was when I first started, you know. So, you know, I kind of feel like that's back again, and I'm just, you know, I couldn't be more happier. So I'll let you guys go. Yes, I did officially make the switch, and yeah, I have nothing left Pentax except L mount adapter and an old manual focus 28mm 3.5 lens that I actually plan on giving to somebody pretty soon. So I hope you all have a good one. Have a blessed day.